What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. This is the channel where we sit down and cover different comic book stories from different comic book companies. Today, we're going to jump back over to Marvel Comics, and we are going to cover the last Marvel Color book. What is a Marvel Color book? Well, back in the early 2000s, Jeff Loeb and Tim Sales worked together on 4 different books. Basically were called Daredevil Yellow, Hulk Gray, and Captain America White. Now, the 4th and final book we are going to cover today is, of course, Spider-Man Blue, the one most fans love the most. This is the last Color book. And like the other Color books, it's retelling a story how the main character fell in love with a certain love interest. Of course, in this one, it's Peter Parker telling us how he fell in love with Gwen Stacy. So, if you do like today's comic book video, please hit that like button down below and also subscribe to the channel for more content to come in the near future. I do hope you enjoy today's video. So with the opening of this book, we get hit with the tearjerker because Spider-Man tells us it is Valentine's Day and he doesn't want to be anybody's Valentine. The reason why is because of how much he misses Gwen Stacy, the woman he loved who died thanks to his battle with the Green Goblin. Then he tells us that he is going to tell us the story about how Gwen Stacy and him had fell in love. He jumps back to the day where the Green Goblin had figured out that Spider-Man was Peter Parker. Of course, this was huge back then because the Green Goblin was the first villain to find out that Spider-Man is Peter Parker. Also the fact that Peter Parker, it was one of his worst days because Green Goblin attempted to kill Spider-Man right then and there. After he had killed Spider-Man, he was going to go and kill everyone Peter Parker loved. Of course, we know that with Spider-Man telling us that this took place in the past, Spider-Man was able to break free and fight the Green Goblin, which of course began a battle all over the warehouse and the warehouse caught on fire. Then a few explosions go off in the building to send the Green Goblin flying. With the Green Goblin being sent flying all over the building, well, of course, he is knocked out temporarily and Spider-Man wakes him up. Spider-Man finds out that the Green Goblin is Norman Osborn, except Norman Osborn has no idea why he is wearing the Green Goblin outfit and why he is in this warehouse. He basically had amnesia. I just butchered that word, amnesia. Whew, sorry y'all. After being knocked out, to Spider-Man, that night the Green Goblin died because Norman Osborn forgot that he was the Green Goblin. Of course, Spider-Man was wrong. Of course, this leads into Peter Parker going to the Daily Bugle, where he is confronted by J. Jonah Jameson and Robbie Robertson. Word got out about Norman Osborn and the Green Goblin incident. Norman Osborn supposedly defeated the Green Goblin, but he was badly injured and he's in a hospital. Now the Daily Bugle needs a photo. Lucky for Peter, he can get in the hospital because he is a friend of Harry Osborn. Now when he gets there, this actually begins the bond between Harry Osborn and Peter Parker. Before this, Harry Osborn really did not like Peter Parker that much. He did not hate him, but he did not truly like him. Just Peter being there makes Harry like him more. Now, when Peter leaves, of course, that is when Flash Thompson and Gwen Stacy arrive at the scene. We see here that Peter Parker was able to catch the eye of Gwen Stacy. This is kind of telling us that she is interested in Peter Parker now. And Jeff Loeb quickly builds up the idea of Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy being together. It all starts with the idea that Peter Parker wants to get a motorcycle, except of course he has no money. Lucky for him, Aunt May has some money she used to save with Uncle Ben, and she gives it to Peter Parker, which does give him the ability to go buy the motorcycle. Now, of course, if you are Peter Parker, you want to show off your new ride, especially to the girl you have a crush on. So he goes to the school, pulls up on Harry Osborn, Flash Thompson, and Gwen Stacy, which of course catches the eye of Gwen Stacy, whom she asks to ride on the back of the bike with Peter Parker. He agrees. He's not going to say no to the girl he has a crush on. Now, at the same time, he is giving her a ride around town on his motorcycle. At the home of Aunt May, there is another woman who is interested in Peter Parker and was looking for him. Aunt May tells her that he is not here at the moment, and of course we know who this is. Now we have Jeff Loeb, who gives us the bad guy of the story. We don't get to see who it is just yet. We only get a glimpse of him in this section. He comes after Peter Parker thought it would be a good idea to get a newspaper from a newspaper stand that is talking about how the Green Goblin is dead, which of course we know he is not. But after Spider-Man leaves, that is when we see our mysterious villain hiding in the shadows, and we have no idea who it is. Then we get a classic scene where you have the two people who are interested in each other, except something happens that keeps them from being together, because we see Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker working together in science class, and Gwen is trying her best to make plans to have a night alone with Peter Parker. Before Peter is able to make his move or even say yes to what Gwen Stacy is trying to do, Flash Thompson kind of ruins their plans by stepping in and sending Peter Parker away. The next person we get to focus on is the Rhino. And can I say, Rhino is one of my favorite villains. I honestly don't know why. Something about the Rhino is cool to see, but of course, Rhino is causing havoc in the city. Works for Peter Parker because he needs some money. So why not take some pictures of himself being Spider-Man and fighting against the Rhino? At this point in Marvel Comics, Rhino wore a suit that was tough as a rhino's hide. Spider-Man could not actually hurt him with the usual punches and kicks. He had to make Rhino run into things to knock himself out. So that is what happens. And Spider-Man tells the police he will be right back. There is a good reason why he is leaving the Rhino right now unconscious. The reason why is because he is meeting up with Kurt Connor, aka the Lizard. Now of course, he was the Lizard at one point, but thanks to Spider-Man, he was able to turn him back into normal. With Spider-Man coming here, he is hoping that Kurt Connor can make something that can get rid of Rhino's suit hide. These two were able to make something real quick, and Spider-Man leaves. Also to point out that Kurt Connor's family, his wife and kid, do not live with him currently. They do stay in Florida, and that is something important in this book to remember. Now of course, Spider-Man goes back, and this leads into a whole fight between the two of them. Spider-Man is actually toying with Rhino first before he uses the new web fluid Kurt Connor made for Spider-Man. As we can see, Rhino's suit begins to fall apart thanks to the web fluid that he used. Seeing this scene, it is actually hard to build my case that Rhino is one of Spider-Man's best villains, because honestly, this is a funny scene. But Spider-Man does win this battle and leaves with Rhino defeated. Then to make Spider-Man love life even more interesting, well, you have Spider-Man get home and change back into being Peter Parker, where he is greeted by Aunt May, who tells him about another girl she wants him to meet. Of course, we know this person is the one and only Mary Jane Watson, explaining that this was the first time he met her and he was quickly attracted to her. I have no idea why I say attached. He was attracted to her. Now, folks out there, when it comes to your dating life, don't bring the hot girl your aunt just introduced you to and take her somewhere where your actual crush would be at. The reason why I say that is because Peter Parker actually takes Mary Jane to the same spot that Gwen Stacy, Flash Thompson, and Harry Osborn are at. When everyone sees her, they are so surprised about how attractive she is. But they are even more surprised to find out that she is with Peter Parker. Of course, you can tell that Gwen Stacy is kind of jealous of the fact that Peter Parker is with Mary Jane and not with her. So this makes things harder for Peter Parker, to be honest. Luckily for Peter Parker, something happens that gives him the ability to leave, which of course we find out that Kurt Connor has turned into the Lizard. That gives Peter Parker the chance to leave, but Mary Jane wants to go because Peter Parker told her the reason why he is going is to take pictures and she wants to see her new man at work. Of course, you have Peter Parker say yes to let her go, but he knows that he has to be careful because now he's putting her in danger. We are going to skip over the page where she was able to help Peter Parker sneak into the crime scene, because all it did was give him the ability to change into Spider-Man when no one was looking. Now, when Spider-Man gets inside the subway station, he finds the wife and son of Kurt Connor. They tell him that one moment they saw Kurt, the next he was gone. The reason why is, again, he turned into the Lizard. So you have Spider-Man go and try to find the Lizard to bring him back in. This section gives us the moment to see Spider-Man fight against the Lizard, and I want to mention that when it comes to the Lizard, you have to remember that it's kind of like the Hulk situation, that this is a completely different persona for Kurt Connor. The Lizard has a mind of his own. Now, the Lizard was able to get away, but of course, this is not the end of the fight between these two, because Spider-Man had a good idea where the Lizard would go next, which is the lab of Kurt Connor's. So when Spider-Man gets there, of course, he finds the Lizard. So round 2 begins between the two of them. Now, to make things harder for Spider-Man, well, Kurt Connor's family is knocking on the door looking for him. So Spider-Man has to hurry and find the cure for the Kurt Connor Lizard situation and give it to him before his family sees him as the Lizard. By the time they walk into the room, Kurt Connor has turned back into his human form and Spider-Man leaves with the day being saved. Now, to end this day, when he gets home, he finds Harry Osborn chilling on his Aunt May's porch, which makes Peter Parker think that something must have happened to Norman Osborn, since he is in the hospital. Except this is the moment that we all know about. It is when Harry Osborn asks Peter Parker to be his roommate, that the rent is free because Norman Osborn owns the building. Peter Parker is confused on what to say because he is afraid to leave his Aunt May behind. So Harry Osborn says he will give Peter some time to think about it before he leaves. Harry tells Peter Parker that he finds Mary Jane attractive and wants to ask her out, even more now since Peter said him and Mary Jane are just friends. The next day, we pick up with Aunt May and Peter Parker talking about the idea of Peter Parker moving out of his aunt's house. Of course, this was huge back in the old days because this was the first time Peter Parker would not be living with his aunt. Also, the fact that Peter Parker was scared to leave Aunt May alone, except he knew that sooner or later he would have to leave his Aunt May. She surprised him by telling him that she overheard him and Harry Osborn conversation. She thinks it would be a great idea for him and Harry to live together. Now we pick up with another Spider-Man villain, which of course is the Vulture, where the original Vulture, Adrian Toomes, is having a heart attack. Now he is confronted by Blakey Draco, who we know becomes the second Vulture. The way he becomes the new Vulture is by begging Adrian Toomes to tell him where he hid the Vulture tech at. So of course you have Adrian Toomes tell Blakey Draco where the suit is hidden. Getting back to Peter Parker and his crazy love life, that is when we see him and Aunt May going to visit Anna Watson's home. Of course, the aunt to Mary Jane in the place Mary Jane lives at the moment. Now this is the moment Peter Parker finds out that Harry Osborn had asked out Mary Jane and they are going on a date. The reason why I say that is because Harry Osborn pulls up in his car to pick up Mary Jane. Now, Peter doesn't say anything about Harry and Mary Jane dating, except he tells Harry that he will accept the offer to be the roommate of Harry Osborn. Now, this is the moment we see Blackie Draco being able to find the Vulture tech, and of course, he gets the idea of becoming the new Vulture. We then learn that our mysterious character, who is going to be the bad guy of this book, had made a deal with Blackie Draco. We learn the deal that Blackie Draco and our mysterious character made was for Blackie to become the new Vulture and go after Spider-Man. That is when we see Spider-Man heading over to his new apartment he got with Harry Osborn. Also, that Harry Osborn had invited everyone over: Flash Thompson, Mary Jane, and of course Gwen Stacy. The problem for Peter is that he is unable to go and join the party because he gets attacked by the new Vulture, and this fight does last for a few pages, but also to show that Spider-Man wasn't ready for a younger and faster Vulture. So this section ends with Spider-Man actually losing this battle and falls on top of another rooftop. Now quickly, Peter Parker was able to regain the strength to get out of the snow and get inside his new apartment. It's just that when he gets there, everyone is gone except of course his new roommate Harry. This is where we see that Peter Parker had gotten sick with a cold because he lay out in the cold for so long. This cold is actually going to make Peter Parker's love life even more stressful. Either way, Peter Parker goes into his new room and literally crashes to get some rest. Then we see that our mysterious villain who made the deal with Blackie Draco was hoping to find a lifeless Spider-Man outside in the cold, except he just finds a spot where Spider-Man was laying at. The next page, we see Adrian Toomes in the hospital, where we find out that he did not have a heart attack. Instead, he was poisoned thanks to Blackie Draco. We learn this thanks to our mysterious villain coming into the hospital room and giving Adrian Toomes the cure so there can be two Vultures now. Getting back to the stressful life of Peter Parker, we see that right now he is laying in bed sick, trying to recover, except that is when he is greeted by Mary Jane, who thought it would be a good idea to bring him some soup. Remember that just in the last chapter, she went out on a date with Harry Osborn, but she is here trying to give Peter Parker some soup, and then of course you have Gwen Stacy walk into the room to read Peter Parker a book that his uncle used to read him when he was younger. The only way Gwen Stacy was able to find out this was because Gwen Stacy had visited Aunt May. Now Peter Parker is lost on what to do in this situation, so he just asked both ladies to leave as a way to say he can get some rest. Now of course this makes both ladies upset because they both went out of their way to try to impress Peter Parker and take care of him as well. Now the real reason why is because outside of his apartment building, well, he sees the vultures flying around. So when Gwen Stacy had that book she wanted to read to him, it reminded him about his uncle, except the moment his uncle died and Peter let a thief walk by him. Remember that when it comes to Peter Parker, if he had stopped that thief from getting away, his uncle would not have died. So when he saw the vultures and thought about his uncle, he knew that he had to stop them, which he does go out there to fight the vultures. And this battle is pretty even between all three sides. Remember that the vultures are not on the same side because Blackie Draco was the one who poisoned Adrian Toomes. So Adrian Toomes is here to actually kill Blackie Draco. Now this leads us into a huge moment for the character Flash Thompson, which helps build his character development. The reason why I say that is because Flash Thompson is outside mad and walking around after being turned down by both Mary Jane and Gwen Stacy. Except thanks to the fight between Spider-Man and both of the vultures, money falls from the sky and lands in front of him. Flash Thompson thinks he should take the money to make his day better, except Flash Thompson was saved by Spider-Man because more debris was going to fall on top of him. Spider-Man then has a talk with him, and this is great for Flash Thompson because even though Flash hates Peter Parker, he loves Spider-Man. So when Spider-Man tells him to give the money over to the police, Flash begins to think about the idea of him needing to move on with his life and do more with his life. You have Spider-Man go back up into the sky to fight against both of the Vultures, where this fight doesn't last that long. You have Spider-Man being able to take care of both of the Vultures in one single move, and the day is saved. So this is the end of the Vulture's problem we got in this book. Now for Flash Thompson, this is the moment you have Flash Thompson announce to everyone, this includes Peter Parker as well, with him being saved by Spider-Man, he is going to join the army. So this was the thing in Spider-Man comics that had removed Flash Thompson for a moment because he had joined the army. Except outside of the building, our mysterious character who has been stalking and wanting to kill Spider-Man had found a piece of the Spider-Man outfit and was able to follow the scent of Spider-Man to, of course, the apartment of Peter Parker and Harry Osborn. So now our mysterious character knows that Spider-Man lives in that apartment. The next chapter opens up with our mysterious character watching footage of Spider-Man fighting against the different villains from his rogue gallery. Now at this point, it was kind of obvious who the mysterious character is. It is, of course, Kraven, but now they don't show us Kraven here. They are trying to still have the effect that we don't know who it is, but the way he is drawn in the shadows, we know that it is, of course, Kraven, and we're going to see him fight against Spider-Man very soon in this book. Now back to Peter Parker in his crazy dating life, we see him holding a Valentine's Day card that lets us know that someone had asked Peter Parker to be their Valentine, and Peter thinks it must be Aunt May. We know it has to be Gwen Stacy or even maybe Mary Jane herself. We learned that tonight they are going to have a party to send off Flash Thompson since he joined the army. Except this is the night you have both Gwen Stacy and Mary Jane both there, and of course dressed nice for the occasion. So Peter Parker, this could be a very interesting night. When Peter goes back to check up on Harry Osborn, that's when he finds out that Norman Osborn called. For some reason, he wants to stop by to check up on Peter Parker and Harry Osborn, but he is more excited to see Peter than his own son Harry. Peter can see that Harry is somewhat bothered by it, but at the same time, Harry wants to focus on the party celebration they are having for Flash Thompson. So they kind of leave it at that and go join the big party. Remember, when I said that our mysterious character had the scent of Spider-Man, well, this is the moment they let us know that it is Kraven the Hunter who was the person who has been trying to capture Spider-Man. Now, this is also the moment you have Flash Thompson try his best to stop Kraven. But of course he fails. Now you have Kraven actually grab Harry Osborn thinking that Harry is actually Spider-Man. So you have Kraven grab Harry Osborn and leave. Which this means that Peter Parker has to change into his Spider-Man outfit so he can go chase down Kraven. So of course we get the classic Spider-Man fight between him and Kraven. You have Spider-Man try his best to fight against Kraven and at the same time trying to save Harry Osborn from Kraven. Now this is the moment you have Norman Osborn walk into the room and show us that he was heading towards Peter's and Harry's apartment. This is a very important moment because you have Kraven see Norman Osborn and tell us that he looks familiar. Right after Spider-Man had punched Kraven a few more times, you have Kraven pass out, but he tells us that the Green Goblin was the one who gave him the contract to kill Spider-Man. Kraven always honors his contract. Harry Osborn does take Norman Osborn away so he can rest, Spider-Man of course leaves the scene of the fight. This leads up to the moment we get to see the first kiss between Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker, because it takes place when Peter Parker was changing into his regular day clothes, except you have Gwen Stacy walk into the room right when he finished changing, and she sees the Valentine's Day card that she left him, letting us know that she was the one who sent it to him. And this is her asking Peter Parker one more time for him to be her Valentine's. This ends with Peter Parker and her kissing and him telling us how this is the moment they fell in love. Of course, this moment ends with Peter Parker showing us that he is done recording his message for Gwen Stacy, the woman he loved, the first woman who actually made him feel loved. Even though Mary Jane overheard him talking to the tape recorder, she feels bad for her husband, because she knows how much he actually cared for Gwen Stacy. She came before Mary Jane. So the book ends right there. So if you do like today's comic book video, please hit that like button down below and also subscribe to the channel for more content to come in the near future. Also, any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, that is the end of today's video.